Joe Biden recently made a video on healthcare and his thoughts on healthcare. And it's something. Recently, Joe Biden has been very, what's the right word for it? I guess he seems not well on the campaign trail, and his campaign knows it. That's why they're not letting him go out often. They're not having many events for Joe Biden. They're not having him go out too often because they know every time he talks, people are going to like him less. His campaign realizes that. He has the same problem Hillary Clinton had. Every time she talked, people liked her less. Same with Joe Biden. Every time he talks, people like him less. So they're trying to keep him out of the public eye. They're hoping he can just coast through the primary, somehow get the nomination. And by somehow, I mean, the thumb will be on the scale via the DNC, via the superdelegates, and that he'll get the nomination. And then he would go on and he would get crushed by Trump. Biden would lose to Trump worse than Hillary Clinton did. Because we entertain this fantasy that you need some moderate, quote unquote, a moderate to beat a Republican. That, we can't have, you can't have anybody that's too different or people won't go for it. You can't have anybody that'll rock the boat or people won't go for it. Meanwhile, Donald Trump over in the GOP completely rocked the boat. People went for it because we live in an anti-establishment era. Half the country does not vote. The reason half the country doesn't vote, for the most part, is because they don't feel like there's an option on the ballot. That's how half the country feels. So this idea that, we should have two candidates that are as close together as possible because half the country doesn't feel like there's an option on the ballot, that's just nonsense. It's the complete opposite of what's actually going on. But the establishment media and the establishment donor class and the politicians who are bought by said donor class, they want you to believe that that's reality. Why do they want you to believe that that's reality? Because that keeps voter turnout low. It keeps people disengaged, and it allows them to continue their way of running this plutocracy. That's what's really going on. So here's a video Joe Biden made about healthcare. Let me go ahead and share this. All right.
I was sworn into the United States Senate next to a hospital bed. My wife and daughter had been killed in a car crash. Lying in that bed were my two surviving little boys. I couldn't imagine what it would have been like if we didn't have the health care they needed immediately.
Okay, Joe, here's the problem. A lot of people in this country can imagine that. They can imagine what it feels like to not have the health care they need immediately. And I'm sorry about the tragedy. I'm not trying to make light of the tragedy in Joe Biden's life. I'm really not. But yeah, the problem is millions of Americans can imagine not having the health care that they needed immediately. And you, Joe Biden, want to perpetuate policies that make sure these Americans don't have the health care that they need. That's the problem. All right, let's continue watching this. It's only a minute long.
40 years later, one of those little boys, my son Bo, was diagnosed with terminal cancer and given only months to live. I can't fathom what would have happened if the insurance companies had said for the last 6 months of his life, you're on your own.
A lot of people can fathom that. Is this a commercial for Medicare for All? It should be. That's what it should be. We know it isn't. He's just describing what insurance companies do. And that didn't happen to him because he has quality health care. Because he's in the government, so he gets decent health care that he doesn't want to give to anyone else.
The fact of the matter is, health care is personal to me. Obamacare is personal to me. When I see the president try to tear it down and others propose to replace it and start over, that's personal to me too. We got to build on what we did because every American deserves affordable health care. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
So, you're using... Hi, Lucy. Good morning. How are you? Welcome to the show. You're a little late for your co-hosting duties, but it's okay. We can catch you up. We just watched a video about Joe Biden where he defends the status quo. And he uses his deaths in his family to do so. I'm not trying to make light. Again, I'm not trying to make light of the tragedy Joe Biden has been through in his life. You know, that's sad. That's too bad. It really is. But to use that tragedy to make a commercial for the status quo, he knows how many millions are left out in the cold because of the Affordable Care Act. By the way, it's not Obamacare. It's the Affordable Care Act. It's essentially Mitt Romney's healthcare plan. Joe Biden just made a commercial defending a right-wing healthcare plan, talking about tragedies in his life, and using those strategies to defend a status quo that leaves Americans out in the cold without healthcare. And he's saying, I can't imagine not having the healthcare we needed. I can't imagine the insurance industry telling us to pound salt. A lot of Americans can imagine that, Joe. A lot of Americans have been through tragedy just as you have. And they were told to pound sand. They were told that they weren't going to get the care they need. You see cases like that all the time. You see cases, 45,000 people die per year, and I think it's higher than that at this point. It's only escalating because they don't have access to healthcare. They have things that could have been prevented, but they died because they don't have healthcare that they need. And Joe Biden uses tragedy in his life to perpetuate a status quo that leaves millions uninsured. Talking about how he had the healthcare he needed. He can't imagine not having it. So you're going to defend a status quo that leaves millions without the health insurance you had? So that when tragedy struck you, you at least had health coverage? You want to make sure other people don't have that? Joe Biden has demonstrated time and time again, whether you want to look at the fact that he forgot Obama's name. I'm sure some of you guys saw that clip where he straight up forgot Obama's name. He has demonstrated time and time again he is not with it. He does not seem well. He should not be running for office. He should be enjoying retirement. He has demonstrated that on the campaign trail time and time again. But he has a staff. He has people around him. And how did none of them watch this video and say, you know what, that's a bad idea? To use tragedies in your family to perpetuate the status quo, to use tragedies in your family to defend a healthcare plan that we know leaves people out on the cold, and you want to build on it. What does that mean? What does building on Obamacare mean? It means we need to make sure the insurance companies are happy. Well, guess what? The insurance companies in this scenario, they are parasites. That's what they are. The insurance companies are parasites profiting off of our health, profiting off of our lives. To have an efficient healthcare system in this country, they need to go away. It's the equivalent of saying, hey, we got termites in our house. And one exterminator says, we're getting rid of the termites. Another exterminator says, we're going to leave some of the termites around, but they have to participate. They can only eat so much wood. Which exterminator are you going to go with? So Joe Biden using tragedy in his life to defend a status quo healthcare plan that leaves others out in the cold, that leaves millions of people out in the cold. Joe Biden wants a plan where millions do not have access, do not have the healthcare that he had. He's talking about tragedies in his life, how he had the healthcare he needed, and his family had the healthcare they needed. And he wants to defend a plan that makes sure others don't have that. Couldn't this have at the very least been a commercial for a public option? At the very least, Joe Biden could have said, hey, we need a public option. I had this great healthcare, and now you can buy that too. You can have the public option. At the very least, but instead, we're going to build on Obamacare. That's a bunch of baloney. There's nothing to that. That is a substanceless statement with no actual plan because it's leaving the insurance companies at the table. So we've all seen this video, And it's pretty gross. It's pretty gross that Joe Biden uses tragedies in his life, to defend a status quo healthcare state that leaves millions uninsured, where people are dying daily. And nobody in his campaign, they have enough foresight to know, don't let him talk or people are going to like him less. But nobody said, you know what, this isn't the right way to go here. Nobody said that because they're hoping that you can just play on people's emotions. And they're hoping that anybody that criticizes this at all, like, oh, you're making light of deaths in his family. No, no one's doing that. No one's belittling his tragedy or mocking his tragedy or trying to use his tragedy for political gain. That's what he's doing. He's using tragedies in his life for political gain. Not people that criticize the misdirected message there. So Joe Biden, that's the front runner. That's the front runner. Let's get the candidate who is most like Trump to go on and lose to Trump. And by the way, half this country doesn't vote because they don't really feel like there's an option on the ballot. So the way we inspire those people is getting someone who is as close to Trump as possible. Makes sense? Nowhere. Doesn't make sense at all.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our